Hello, everybody. Eric here. It is that time of year again, and I'm going to go over my 10 favorite books of 2023. And then there's going to be some honorable mentions, but I pulled out my 10 favorite books. Not not saying these are the best books to have come out in 2023. They're just the ones that I enjoyed the most, I think. And they're going to be in no particular order, just the way they're stacked up here on my table. And I just want to mention that there are tons of books I didn't get to in 2023. A lot that probably would have ended up on this list. I didn't get to the new, I'm looking over at some of the books. I didn't get to the new Stephen Graham Jones or Cynthia Palaio, or there were a couple others that stood out when I was pulling these out. Ronald Malfi. Victor Laval, Lone Woman by Victor Laval. I didn't get to that one. So there's tons and tons of great books that came out that I have that I just didn't get to. There were some great books that I read that didn't come out in 2023, so they're not on the list because I wanted to make this one books that came out this year. I think there's one that's sort of a caveat to it, but I guess we'll jump in. And as I said, this is in no particular order, just the way they're stacked up here. So the first book that I want to talk about is one of the more recent books that I've read, and that is Brainworms by Alison Rumfitt. And this is a Tor Nightfire book. The second book I have read by Alison Rumfitt, and she just blows me away every time. This is political, satirical, I believe. Very much reminded me of the old Del Abyss books. It really messes with your head and it's written in some weird ways, but nothing that I found off-putting. And it was very impactful, and I really, really enjoyed the experience of reading Brainworms by Alison Rumfitt. The next book in this stack just happens to be the most recent book that I read, and that is The End by Kaylee Dobbs from Black Shuck Books. It's number 5 in their Black Shuck Shadows series, and it's just a little tiny short story collection. There's 6 stories in here. They're all about the end of the world in some way, and it was just really, really enjoyable. There's a mix of darker stories and light-hearted stories, but they all go a bit dark because they're about the end. I love Kaylee Dobbs' writing. I love her, how quickly she can give us character development in these short stories. Just a lot of fun. I really, really like this book. Then we have more lighthearted stuff, and that is Attack of the Killer Tomatoes by Jeff Strand. The novelization based on the original screenplay by Costa Dillon, John DeBella, and Steve Peace. This is one of the funniest books I have ever read. I put it up there with Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and Good Omens, which are always like number 1 and 2 of the funniest books I've ever read. Jeff Strand is a great writer. He's best known as a comedy horror writer. He does young adult stuff. He has books that don't really have comedy elements to them any more so than any like general story might have something funny here and there. But a lot of his stuff is outright funny and horrific. And this is absolutely hilarious. I was laughing out loud constantly. And it takes some liberties from the film that I think completely work. I don't know what material he had to work with when he was doing this. But I did watch the film again right after finishing the book. There are some big differences here and there, but really, really funny. Hilarious. All right, then we have. I double checked a couple of these just to make sure, but I'm pretty darn sure that this one is 2023. Silver Nitrate by Silvia Moreno Garcia. I haven't read a lot of her stuff, even though I have most of it. I haven't read all of it, but I've really enjoyed what I've read from her. And the fact that this takes place somewhat in the movie industry. The main character is a film editor, and it's about a potentially cursed film and a cult and an old Nazi, and just great characters, a slow build, and then it just goes crazy by the end. The stuff that's going on at the end, just wild. So I'm trying to avoid the ring light's reflection on here. But Silver Nitrate by Silvia Moreno Garcia. It's from Del Rey. Absolutely fantastic book. And then this one, this is a book that I didn't start off loving. I talked about it in my review. That I kept, my rating kept bouncing up and down as I was reading it, but in the end, pretty sure I gave it 5 stars. I love this cover. This is Dead 11 by Jimmy Giuliano from Dutton. There you go. It's Dutton. And this is about it's about a guy whose sister has disappeared on this island. And so he goes there to figure out what happened to her. And the story jumps back and forth in time between her going to the island and him going to the island. And the island, this is straight first thing off the inside dust jacket. So it says, on a creepy island where everyone has a strange obsession with the year 1994, a newcomer arrives hoping to learn the truth about her son's death. Well, that's the sister, but we're following her and the brother, and I think we might meet the sister first, but it's the brother who, it's through following him that we learn about her disappearance. But really an interesting story. It took me a little bit of time to get into it. I didn't know what was going to be, where it was going to go, which is a good thing. But there were just certain things that I'd read something and be like, I mean, this is a good story, but maybe it's only a 4-star. But then I'd read another part and be like, no, holy cow, this is crazy. This is 5-star. Well, I ended up giving it 5 stars. Dead 11. It's an easy read. It's got some epistolary stuff going on. Hopefully that fits with like text messages and emails and stuff. There's letters. The whole book isn't that, but really, really good book, and I'm looking forward to seeing what Jimmy Giuliano does next. All right, now the next book would break the rules of some people who do top 10 lists. And so a lot of people, whether it's, I'm watching someone doing their top 10 books of the year, top 10 movies, top 10 games, it's board games, don't like to repeat things. Don't like to repeat authors. If it's books, if it's board games, a lot of people are like, I don't want to, have just a list that's all the same creators or all the same subgenre of game, which I understand to a point, but for me, if it's your favorite, then it's your favorite. And so, the next book I'm going to talk about is Tell Me I'm Worthless by Alison Rumfitt. So that's 2 Alison Rumfitt books. This is the one I said might have a caveat, and it wasn't that whole part about having the same author twice, but the fact that the first U.S. edition is 2023. The actual copyright's 2021, but the first U.S. edition, which is where I'm at, so that's how I'm counting it, because, we all know America's the center of the universe. 2023. So, Tell Me I'm Worthless by Alison Rumfitt. This book blew me away. It's about a transgender woman and her cisgendered friend, ex-friend. There's some conflict going on. Something happened in a haunted house years ago that sort of pulled them apart. And so we're following them in the present day, but we're getting little flashes to this house. And there are chapters just wholly dedicated to the house itself. The house is a character. We eventually find out what happened. This book blew my mind. I absolutely loved it. It is probably my second. Actually, I said I wasn't going to rank these, and these are no particular order, but I will say this is probably my second favorite book of the year. The first thing I ever read by Alison Rumfitt, when I saw that Brainworms was coming out, I was incredibly excited. Couldn't wait to get that, because this was so impactful, so incredibly written, with great characters and interesting things done with the writing, with the formatting of the writing. It's powerful, it's political. I can definitely see it pissing off some people, although I'm not sure the people it would piss off are the type of people that would necessarily read it. But if they did, I can see people being ridiculous and getting pissed off by it. Yeah, that's me getting sliding my own little political opinion in there. But absolutely an amazing book. And now I've read 2. I can't wait to see what Alison Rumfitt does next, because they've both been fantastic, and this one is just incredible. All right. Let's go with something a little more fun, although it is incredibly graphic and disturbing, and there might be a trigger warning in it. But I absolutely loved this one as well. And this is Hell by Judith Sonnet. It says, "The gates are open and the dead hunger for living blood." This is Judith Sonnet's tribute to Italian horror, Lucio Fulci especially, because he had the Gates of Hell trilogy. It's an incredible pastiche of Italian horror. She says that it doesn't have a cohesive story, but I disagree with that. It does have that weird narrative style. I'm not incredibly well versed in Italian horror, but I have watched the 3 Fulci Gates of Hell movies, and it absolutely feels like one of those movies. The characters are interesting, the gore is great. If you're a fan of Fulci, this is a little tiny, mass market sized bit of Lucio Fulci horror in prose form. I'm a big fan of Judith Sonnet, and I think she's incredible at copying, for lack of a better word, styles. I don't feel that's the best way to put it. Emulating, maybe, would be a better way to put it, because this absolutely feels like an Italian horror film. And she's working on a sequel, and I cannot wait. I am so excited for it, because I absolutely loved Hell by Judith Sonnet. Here's something a little different. It's a prequel to a book that I did read earlier in 2023, but that book didn't come out in 2023, so it couldn't be on this list. But this one, absolutely fantastic. Bookshops and Bone Dust by Travis Baldree. It's a cozy fantasy. It's about this orc, Viv, who she's a young mercenary. She's wounded at the very beginning of the book, And so she has to spend her time in this town recovering, and she meets this bookshop owner and the owner of a bakery. You know, she makes some friends, gets involved in their lives, but there's also this underlying bit of danger lurking around, and it's absolutely fantastic. It's just as good as the first book is Legends and Lattes, and Travis Baldree just creates these wonderful, memorable, lovable, for the most part, you know, not necessarily bad guys, lovable characters. And while there's not a huge amount of action, there is more action in this than in Legends and Lattes, as far as, like, you know, fantasy action, sword fights, and that kind of stuff. But it doesn't matter. I'm pulled into the world. I'm pulled into the characters, and I want to know where their relationships are going to go. And for anyone who doesn't know, Legends and Lattes is basically about Viv retiring from being an adventurer and mercenary and opening a coffee shop in a fantasy world. So just fantastic. I absolutely love this book. All right, there's only 2 left, and then we're going to get into some honorable mentions. Before I get to those 2, I keep forgetting, I wanted to point out my brand new t-shirt, Banning Books Only Makes Us Scarier. This is from Ghoulish, ghoulish.rip. It was a limited edition t-shirt. I don't know if they're ever going to do anything else with it again, but I believe it was, if you had to order it by October 31st. I'm bothered by that little thing that's on there. Had to order it by October 31st, and then they only printed up as many as were ordered, I think. So I absolutely had to grab one. I always like to support Ghoulish, Max Booth III, and Laurie Michelle. And I'm definitely anti-banning books, and I thought it was a cool design, so I threw it on for this video. Support Ghoulish Books. Go to Ghoulish RIP. And if you're around San Antonio, Texas, go to the Ghoulish bookstore. Someday I'm going to make the trek. All right. So, the penultimate book on this list in this video is Holly by Stephen King. A whole novel starring Holly Gibney. It's a mystery thriller, and Holly is hired to find a missing girl. We, the readers, know right off the bat that there is serial killings going on. I don't want to say too much about it, except that, one, Holly is my favorite Stephen King character, and I really, really liked this book. For me, it was different. I haven't read probably even half of what Stephen King has written. I'm not one of the experts, but it's a different... It felt different to me, in a good way, and man, I don't want to give anything away. If you're a Holly Gibney fan, I think you're going to absolutely love this. We've got just some interesting developments in her character and in her life, and I don't know that you have to have read all of the previous Holly Gibney stuff, because I haven't read it, all of it. I haven't read Finders Keepers and End of Watch. I was introduced to Holly in The Outsider, and then I read Mr. Mercedes and If It Bleeds. But this is just all Holly all the time, and it reads like a mystery thriller. There are chapters dedicated to the serial killings, so we know what's going on. We know about the bad guys, but Holly doesn't. So it's got that Columbo, not a whodunit, but a how catch 'em, as they call it, and it all works. And Holly's the glue that holds it all together. I loved Holly by Stephen King. And then finally, we have another book that blew me away. I gave this book 6 out of 5 stars. I'm trying to remember if I did that with any of these others. Possibly Tell Me I'm Worthless. Excuse me. I'm going to take a drink because my throat's getting a little dusty. All right. All the Sinners Bleed by S.A. Cosby. This is a mystery thriller. A black sheriff, a serial killer, a small town ready to combust. S.A. Cosby has blown me out of the water every time I've read his fiction. Now, to be fair, that's only twice. I haven't read, I can see it over there, Razorblade Tears yet. I read Blacktop Wasteland, which was absolutely fantastic. And then All the Sinners Bleed. I'm trying to remember if I've read any short stories by him. And I have his other book or books. But this was just amazing. The writing is so great. He, again, someone who just builds wonderful characters, whether they're the characters we love or the characters we hate. I every time I talk about him, I compare him to Joe Lansdale, because with just the 2 books that I've read from him, he's up there in the Joe Lansdale stratosphere. He has become one of my favorite writers. He tells an amazing story in an amazing way with amazing characters and twists and turns, and this was just a fantastic book. I know I said these weren't in any particular order, but this is probably my favorite book of the year. It's tough between this and Tell Me I'm Worthless by Alison Rumfitt, and they're 2 completely different types of books. But All the Sinners Bleed by S.A. Cosby, he's another author. At this point, I'm going to buy whatever he's writing and putting out. And if I didn't have so many other books to read, and if I didn't want to run out of things to read from S.A. Cosby, I would have already torn through the other books that I have by him. But he doesn't have that much out at the moment, and so I'm spreading it out so I don't start jonesing for more when there isn't any more. Can't wait to see what he does next. S.A. Cosby, All the Sinners Bleed. Absolutely fantastic. So that's my top 10 favorite books of the year. Now, I'm going to pull out my list here of everything that I read, because there's a couple things I want to give honorable mention to, just for the heck of it. But I didn't write these down, the honorable mention books, so I'm actually going to look through my list and see what pops up. Now, right off the bat, the very first thing that I read in January 2023 is a much older book. Should I even mention it? I am going to mention it because I read it in 2023, but just in case there's anybody that hasn't read The Cabin at the End of the World by Paul Tremblay, absolutely fantastic book. I have not seen the movie Knock at the Cabin from M. Night Shyamalan, but The Cabin at the End of the World I thought was fantastic. So, all right, so I'll try to keep that the only book that I mentioned that wasn't from the year, although I don't have dates written down, so maybe some of these, while newer, didn't necessarily come out this year. But another honorable mention I wanted to talk about was Earth versus the Nudist Camp Freaks by Judith Sonnet. There she is again. And this is part of a 10-day challenge that she did with 2 other authors, Candice Nola and Lucas Mangum, and they were writing books inspired by 50s science fiction. And once again, Judith Sonnet absolutely captured the feeling of a 50s science fiction movie. The dialogue, the characters, the way the story unfolded felt like I was watching an old 50s science fiction movie, which I'm a fan of. And she just, again, this is why I say she's so good at emulating different styles. Um, so that was a fantastic book. Let's see. What else have we got? Um, Deadline by John Wayne Kaminali and Ex Boogeyman by Christopher Triana. I read those right in a row. Those are both a lot of fun. Deadline is about a guy that signs a contract. He's a writer and having problems with his agent, but can't get out of his contract. Is that it? Is he a writer? And gets this notification that these people can get him out of his contract and set him up with a better deal, but then it turns out to be a very Bentley Little kind of thing going on. It was a quick little read, but a lot of fun. And then Ex Boogeyman by Christopher Triana is about an actor that played the killer in a series of slasher movies, and he finds out that there's going to be a remake, and he has not been asked to reprise the role or even have a cameo, and he kind of snaps. And it's very, very fun, especially if you're a fan of slasher films. It's a lot of fun. Alien Enemy of My Enemy by Mary Sangiovanni was, this is another one. I'm not sure it came out in 2023, but I thought it was one of the, a really good book in the Alien franchise. And yeah, I don't know. I don't want to give anything away. There's xenomorphs. There's people dealing with xenomorphs. It was a lot of fun. The Donut Legion by Joe R. Lansdale. Surprisingly, didn't make it on this list. It's a great book, but it's, I don't know. I wanted to highlight some of these other books. I had different types of enjoyment from these other books. It's a Joe Lansdale. It's great. It's not his best. Maybe that's why I didn't put it on my top 10. But it is absolutely worth reading. It's Joe Lansdale, The Donut Legion. And it's about a guy whose ex-wife gets involved with a cult. And so he looks into her disappearance. Something like that. Let's see. Okay, turn this over. A lot of old stuff in here. The Unicorn Killer by Candice Nola, a very tiny novella that was a lot of fun about a serial killer who's looking for a hook to sort of vault him into the spotlight. Episode 13 by Craig DeLuey, a fantastic epistological story about are they just a podcast or a YouTube show that maybe a network show. Anyway, it's ghost hunters. They go into haunted houses and stuff, and they're doing this special for their 13th episode. And this is it's told in the journals that the people make and the emails that they're sending back and forth to the production people, and there's some text messages, so it's all the epistolary kind of thing, and it builds into a really wild, very bizarre story. It was really good. Salt Grows Heavy by Cassandra Khaw. I'm a fan of her stuff that I've read. I have some stuff from her I haven't read yet, and this one is a horror. Call it a sequel to The Little Mermaid. I've heard some people say like a horror retelling, but essentially it would be after The Little Mermaid marries the prince. And it has a plague doctor in it, and just some crazy stuff, and it's definitely horrific. The Haunting of Alejandra by V. Castro. A great book about, would it be postpartum depression? I'm trying to think of the timeline, so I'm not sure if it's postpartum depression or just depression, but there's much more to it than that, and it's a generational thing. Very, very interesting. Big fan of V. Castro. She wrote a great alien novel as well, but since it's not in the 2023 list, it must have come out in 2022. That's when I read it. A House with Good Bones by T. Kingfisher. I called this cozy horror. I don't know if that's accurate, but that's how I felt about it. Woman goes home to take care of her mom. Things are weird, and it's just written in a nice, breezy, easy to read style with fun characters and some weird twists and turns, and goes places I didn't expect. Pinata by Leopoldo Gout. When I reviewed this, I talked about how the first part had an Exorcist kind of feel to it, and then the second part went into what I called zebra horror territory. It just goes off the rails. Just insanity in the second half. Both halves work. They work well together. Really, really enjoyed Pinata by Leo Gout. Let's see. So that was on my list. Lush and Other Tales of Boozy Mayhem by Duane Swierczynski is a short story collection. Duane Swierczynski writes thrillers, things with a sci-fi twist, noir types of things. His earlier works were very over the top. His more recent works have been a little more serious. Still wonderful. This has a wide range of stories, and some of them even tie together. Just a great short story collection from a great writer. That was already on my top 10. Let's see. I read a lot in 2023. Over 100 at this point. That's probably where I'm going to fall. It was around 100. 101 Horror Books to Read Before You're Murdered by Sadie Mother Horror Hartman is a great nonfiction resource of her picks of the horror books that you should read from this century, essentially. And she tells us at the beginning she's leaving off Stephen King. She's promoting more lesser known or independent authors, and it's a great list, and it's got all this symbology, so you can quickly see. There's a little, like, the main part of the page is the book. You got the cover and what the book's about, what she has to say about it, but on the side is this little legend that gives you some quick facts, and then these symbols will tell you, is it a haunted house, is it this, is it that, the sort of all the subgenres that it might fall into. Really, really fun book, interesting. I put some, I've read tons of the stuff that's on there, but there were things I hadn't read that I put on my wish list to remind me to pick them up. But a really great book. There was a book I had wanted to talk about, but it did not come out in 2023. Unfortunately, the author had a book come out in 2023, and I haven't read it this year, so it won't make it on next year's list. Maybe I'll talk about them. I'll make it an honorable mention or something. There's a lot of old stuff that I read. Did some retro reading. Here we go. Now we're on the last page. See, that didn't come out in 2023. The Last Haunt by Max Booth III is a little novella, another sort of epistolary, except this is in the form of interviews. And it's the author is interviewing people because they're making a documentary about this haunt, this horror haunt, which is, the haunted houses that you go through for Halloween. something happened one year and then something worse happened the next year, and this is people telling the story, and just a fantastic way to tell this story. And it's again some I like that, since these people are being interviewed after everything has happened, the the story that is being told in chronological order, but these people are talking about, there are hints at what's to come, because for these people it's already happened. Just really well written. I'm a huge fan of Max Booth III, and this was his most recent, I believe, and it was fantastic. The Handyman Method, I just put that review up recently. Nick Cutter and Andrew F. Sullivan reminded me of a cross between Cunning Folk by Adam Neville and something by Bentley Little. But it was a lot of fun. And that's on my list. I think that's it. That's plenty. So that's a lot of just sort of random honorable mentions, things that I really enjoyed but didn't quite make the top 10. So that's it. Check out ghoulish.rip. So awesome that they were able to get the .rip. They might have things with this on it. I know that they had coffee mugs and different things, but I can't say for sure. All I know is I made sure I got my order for the t-shirt in before the deadline, whether or not there's anything else available. They do have merch available at their store, online and in their physical store, I assume. So that's my 10 favorite books and then some of 2023. What about you? Have you read any of these? Did you like them? Did you not like them? What are your favorite reads of 2023? You don't have to give me 10. You can give me 10, but you don't have to. One or two or three, whatever. Were there any books you were disappointed in? This is kind of an open conversation, I think, for books of 2023. Were there any that disappointed you? There's a book that I'm going to have to try again. It's been on a lot of people's top 10 list for the year, and some people have called it their favorite haunted house book ever. Some people have said it's their favorite horror novel of 2023. As I said, a lot of people putting it on their top 10 lists. I started it and just couldn't get into it. I read, I don't know how many chapters, and it was doing nothing for me. So I set it aside. I've read some other stuff. I think probably in January, I'm going to go back and I'm going to pick up from where I left off, because it hasn't been that long since I set it aside. I started it in December, and maybe the end of November, but it wasn't that long ago. I remember everything that happened so far. I'll pick it up and try it again. Maybe I just wasn't in the right mood for it. Should I tell you what it is? I've already said, some people might have guessed, since folks have called it their favorite haunted house book of the year. It's How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix. And I really enjoyed My Best Friend's Exorcism. I really enjoyed The Final Girl support group. I'm looking over at my stack of Grady Hendrix books. And I don't know. Just couldn't get into it. So that's, at this point in time, a disappointment for me. Maybe I'll be in a different mood, a more receptive mood when I try it again. Maybe I'll get to the point where it'll take off for me. We'll see. If I read another, let's say I've read 50 pages. If I read another 50 pages and I'm still not into it, I'm probably going to give up on it completely, because that's a lot of time and effort to put into a book that's doing nothing for me. I reread a couple things that were disappointing. We don't need to get, I didn't even review them because they were old books. And so I didn't feel the need to review them. But for the most part, if I'm not getting into a book, I generally will just stop reading it because I have so much to read. So it's hard for me to say a book has disappointed me if I haven't even finished the book. But there were a couple that I did finish because they were quick reads, and I was hoping for something better. One was a reread that was nowhere near as good as I thought it was back in the 80s or 70s. And the other one was my first time read for me. It was a novelization that I just didn't think was a very good novelization. It's an old book, picked up at the comic book shop. But anyway, what about you? Let's talk about your reading experiences for 2023. And if you have any questions, well, if you have any comments, questions, or corrections, put those in the comments below. And of course, put your replies to my question in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe, all the usual YouTube stuff. If you care to follow me on other social media, my Twitter is @Rona5757. My Instagram, where I post pictures of books, comic books, board games, fuzzy animals, is Eric Smith 5757. That's Eric with a K, ERIKSMITH 5757. And if you're on Blue Sky, I am @EL Smith. That is all I have for you for this video. I almost said for 2023, but I believe I'm going to post this video Christmas weekend, which means there will be more videos before the end of 2023. So that's it for this video. And I lost my train of thought. I'm Eric Smith. Until next time, read more books.